Thank you. President Adams, is there anything that's circulating in your mind about what we've been talking about? Anything you want to share? Anything you want to ask us?
Of course. But thank you, Misun. Well, thank you all. A little time check, Michelle. Do we go till 6? Is that what's the deal? No, I have a 6 o'clock Zoom, but I could probably push it back a few minutes, but not too much. So I'm looking at the clock, and I do want to. Well, first, let me just again thank you for taking the time. I mean, you don't need me to be in this Zoom, but I'm grateful that I was able to join you all. You have the discussion without me, but I get to listen in, and I've learned a lot, and it's been really helpful. And I want to make a couple of observations, just again as sort of the outsider coming into your meeting, and then maybe that leads to a couple of questions or things to think about moving forward. I think Ellen said, so what's next? What do we do? One observation is the last time I was part of this discussion with those of you who worked on your essays in the end of the fall semester, I mentioned this at the beginning of this discussion, to see those of you who worked on those essays and were part of that Zoom now, along with everybody else, my first observation is I see hopefulness and joy and smiles again, which I did not see in December, right? There was no vaccine at that time, right?
Right.
Students were checking out because people were in their house and their families were dying. I mean, literally, right? 33,000 people in New York City hadn't died yet. And we had that discussion. So just watching you, I'm so encouraged, again, as a witness to this meeting this afternoon, to see your smiling faces, upbeat, reflecting about serious experiences, but all of you thinking about, well, what do we learn from these experiences and how will it help us do an even better job moving forward, right? So that's just a positive, happy moment, right? And I want to make that was very different from when we were just reading those essays and talking about people's feelings, which, in that context, the context has changed. So that's something just to recognize. The other thing I think that's interesting in listening to your comments is I start to sort them out, and I think about your observations that are about I guess the most precise or the official discussion here. Teaching during a pandemic, and so a lot of you have talked about that, and that brings in Wendy's observation about it wasn't just a pandemic, right? It was George Floyd, it was, right, anti-Asian attacks more recently in Queens. So it wasn't just a pandemic. I mean, as if the pandemic's not enough, right? But so a lot of the reflections, there's a whole set of reflections and observations about the challenges of teaching in that context with those layers of really, really difficult things, and how that affects you as you approach your job, right? To be upbeat and address issues and teach content. So there's a lot that's teaching during, but there's also a lot of discussion about teaching remotely, and that can be separated. We have the discussion about teaching remotely because the pandemic forced us to do it, but we can pull out all these, a lot of lessons about teaching remotely and whether that's synchronous or asynchronous. And we can think, and I'm really interested in this idea, you all said it, but I'm just trying to pull that out and say that's a different bucket in a way, because moving forward, we're not going back to 8% of LaGuardia course sections per semester being available hybrid. No way. We're going to go back to something like, who knows what it is, 25, 30%, I don't know. But we're going back to, it's permanent, right? And we've learned how to do it. And so it's like the pandemic forced us to figure something out, and we are going to keep doing it. So how do we do it really well? How do we do it really, really well? What are the things we learned? What worked, what didn't work? And take the context of the pandemic out of that, right? And just think about all these questions about doing something that now we know we learned how to do it, and we're going to keep doing it to some degree. And then you can flip that and say, well, okay, and for the student experience, the students were forced to do this too. They didn't sign up for it, but they've changed as students as a result because they've learned the platforms. By the way, I spent a fair amount of time with the SGA leadership, and you all know this from your students, but they're like my students. I work on them on advocacy and other issues, but they, said time and again that it was very difficult to master multiple platforms. You know, if you have 4 courses and each is on a different platform, that, you know, and again, and that's for a tech savvy student, but for the older student, for students, you know, that aren't so tech savvy or that really know Apple. I saw someone's comment, it might have, this might have been Nathan, but somebody said, you know, students can know Apple, they can know their phone, they can know an iPad, they don't know, it doesn't mean they know Microsoft, right? It doesn't mean they know an Excel spreadsheet. So the student's the same thing, right? The online learning, you know, for you, it's the online teaching experience, for them, it's the online learning experience. So I separate these buckets, right? Then there's this, I guess, a sub bucket, if you will. I think for community college students, and you know this so much better than I do, but it's just something I try to be mindful of. And in particular for LaGuardia students, who for the most part are low-income students, first generation, I mean, you know your students, right? Who can have some, practically speaking, some obstacles to college of some unfamiliarity. Like, this is a hard thing to navigate, right? It's a hard thing to figure out. Thank goodness for our peer mentors and our advisors and everybody else. But for them, and I, you know, posit really the majority of our students, they benefit not just from the content of a class, but from how it's delivered in an interpersonal way, because the classroom experience drives things like communication, self-confidence, group work. I mean, you all know this, you do this, right? But I'm talking about in-person classroom experience. In an in-person class experience, it's my sense that how the content is presented to students and how a professor helps students learn also teaches a lot of other skills and competencies. Just becoming familiar with and feeling comfortable talking to an adult who might have a different background and certainly a different educational background from you, and having that confidence. That student that does approach you after class for the first time, remember how nervous that student was the first time they did that. I mean, I remember that in the Bronx, right? I remember a student from West Africa approaching me because I had a suit and tie on. And he just said, "Sir, excuse me." He was so nervous. He said, "What do you do here?" And I was just so happy he had the confidence to approach me, you know, this white guy in a suit in the Bronx, and just have a conversation like that, right? But I don't even know how. But the point is, those moments are part of in-person college education, and in a community college setting, for our students, they have great value beyond the content, from the, you know, beyond what's in the syllabus for that day, beyond the material for the paper, or the things, you know, Ian hopes they're going to learn in chemistry for non-chemists. And so again, this is sort of observations last question. If we're going to continue, and I think we will, to have a fair amount of online opportunities for students, how do we ensure that that kind of personal growth and development happens in an online or a remote environment? Because we know it happens and we can see it in a classroom setting. And so again, I think there's real value, and you all know this, but much more than I do, but you know, for our students, there is such value in the interpersonal reaction and the confidence building and the communication skills, the teamwork, the critical thinking, because they're on campus, because they're in their classroom. And it isn't, not to take anything away from what you all do, it's also because they're forced to interact with their peers. So there's also this level of interaction between students in an in-person setting where they're observing each other and they're forming relationships with strangers. And the more diverse the classroom, by the way, age-wise, ethnicity, background, knowledge, skills, I mean, the better. Because again, it's not just you and the student, right? And again, if we're gonna have 25, I'm making up a number, a quarter of our course sections online and done really, really well by faculty that excel at that, how do we make sure that happens too? Or how do we compensate for that? Again, these are things I know you talk about all the time, but they're just, stuff I'm picking up on listening to you this afternoon. I want to go back to a couple of fundamentals. I think it was, maybe it was Ellen and what she wrote in preparation for this, about celebrating our students' success. And, you know, I think, well, I'm sure all of you had better things to do this afternoon than watch my closing sessions thing. But if you're really, really bored and you're like folding laundry, you could listen to parts of it or something like that. It's on YouTube. But one of the things I was trying to do is say, hey, next Thursday, the 17th of June, 2,199 students will graduate right? At the end of, as the pandemic recedes, right? We're down to a positivity rate of less than 1% in New York City. Pandemic's, at least this week it's over. Let's hope it stays that way. But that achievement is, I mean, I was trying to do a graduation, but I didn't know how to describe the awesomeness of that achievement, right? The uniqueness of that achievement of those 2,199 students who endured, signed up for more, came back and had 2.5 semesters of their LaGuardia experience, fully remotely. I mean, it's remarkable. Now, it does speak to you and to the rest of the LaGuardia faculty for getting it done. You got the job done, so congratulations to you. But think about the uniqueness of that achievement for them and how, Ellen, how do we celebrate that, especially when graduation's like this virtual thing? It's kind of so I wanted to go back to that because someone mentioned that, and that's just on my mind this week. There's some technical pieces here for me too. This is a whole nother bucket, but it's around the support. And yeah, I was really angry when someone sent me a picture. I don't know if you guys know this story, but I went crazy. A picture of a LaGuardia storeroom with these very neat columns stacked up, 1,300 Chromebooks stacked up, very nice, perfect boxes, labeled, barcoded, ready for distribution in a storeroom. They were like 6 months. So we had some total breakdowns in our systems. It's unconscionable, it's unacceptable. We cannot work at a place where a student says, or you as a faculty member pick up on a technology gap of a student in your class and you report it to IT or whoever, when we need to make sure there's a chain of command here, and the student goes like half the semester without a Chromebook and it's sitting in the closet. Don't get me started. So like we have to, that stuff, I mean, look, that's on me. We have to fix that. And I made a set of changes, I think, in student affairs, we're gonna be taking care of it. Actually, Faye Butler right now, just to put it on the record, she's in charge of the Chromebooks. You need a Chromebook, just send an email to Faye. So there are definitely things, again, that we're gonna have to fix. And, I want to stop because I'm on my soapbox. I apologize. But the stuff that the observations and your comments and your thinking, obviously got me thinking. But I want to focus. What we need to do is sort these observations out and these lessons learned, and then apply them moving forward to these different areas of solving problems for LaGuardia and for our students. And one thing, I will say this, several were being flexible. Wow, is that important? Because I don't think we know what's coming. I think people are trying to guess, but they don't really know. I mean, and I wish as your president, I could say, I know what's coming, but I don't know what's coming, right? Because everybody thought they knew what was coming in the pandemic, and not the pandemic itself, but for community college enrollment, everybody's like, oh, this is gonna be great because there's an economic recession across the country driven by a global pandemic. Our enrollment should grow. Well, it dropped first 9%, then 12% down to 12,000 students today. So how'd that work out, right? Like everybody called that one wrong. It was totally, counter-cyclical. It was the opposite. So now people think, oh, well, listen, pandemic's ending, students will come back this fall. I'm like, really? Our students are really poor, really poor. And now employers are starting to hire. There haven't been service industry jobs. We lost 630,000 low-wage service industry jobs in a month last year. And those jobs were held by our students' families and their family members and their relatives. And that made it very hard. When they lost those jobs, it makes it very hard to pay rent. When you don't pay rent, you get evicted. Oh, but there's a government imposed and re-extended. I'm the chair of the State Affordable Housing Agency. We have a board meeting tomorrow morning. The governor to stay on eviction moratoriums. It expires August 31st. The eviction moratorium in New York State expires at the end of August. Classes start September 9th. How many of our LaGuardia students are going to say, Mom, Dad, whatever, right? Grandma, I really want to go to college. I want to go to LaGuardia. Well, the landlord showed up and we haven't been paying rent all this time. And now we got to go to housing court. And when we go to housing court, there actually is a hearing officer. And now the eviction feels real. You want to go to college, you got to go get that job, right? So there's a very, sort of economic consequences of COVID stretched, now, like where we are now going into the fall. And that's, again, let me just go back and I'll stop talking about this kind of stuff. It's depressing, but it's real. But the point is flexible, right? So I think we're really not sure what's going to happen in terms of the post-COVID economic conditions of the city, things like housing, things like, our students' families have their savings depleted, of course, and there are rising costs and there is inflation in food and other basic commodities now, obviously. So I think there's real economic pressure, which will affect our students' decisions. I hope I'm way wrong on this, by the way. I mean, I'm a positive person, but I'm also realistic when it comes to the needs of our students. So how many of them are going to want online? Well, maybe more than we think, because they're going to have to work. And maybe we will have students who frankly would prefer to have a college experience and be here, but the compromise to help their family is, okay, I wish I could do in person, but I'm going to do remote asynchronous so I can take that job. But we might have more of that. We got to be flexible, because we might have more of that than we can't predict, but we might, right? I think we might have more adult learners. For the families who can stabilize the household, financial situation, they need upskilling. And look, what is it? 700,000 New Yorkers who have some college, no degree. CUNY technically, as an institution of higher education, produces by a great multiple many more dropouts than graduates, right? If we have think about it, all these years, we're up to 32% graduation rate. Wonderful, wonderful. All those other students are on, left LaGuardia, and most of them didn't go back to another school. They're out there in New York City with some CUNY, no degree. How do we, and we're working on this now, right? Sunil and Ace is working on this. How do we make LaGuardia the place to go back and finish that degree that you stopped in 1996 when you got a job, at the Marriott Marquis in the catering department? How do you, 2002, 2012, how do we make LaGuardia a place? And those are going to be older learners. They have not been in a classroom in a long time, very long time in some cases. They may not be that tech savvy. Blackboard, what's that, right? Again, Lee's word, flexible. If we're going to accommodate them, we're going to have to be flexible, because it's hard to predict. And I would say, this is where my little closing thing, Michelle wanted me to just ask you all about innovation. To me, you have to, if you're going to be innovative, it starts with being flexible. They kind of go hand in hand, right? And how do we kind of advance the culture of innovation at LaGuardia, which I mentioned briefly at the end of my opening session remarks? How do we have you, based on these experiences you just described, innovate, right? And create solutions in a context of flexibility and really in a context of meeting students' needs. If there's one sort of thing that's like in the last few months been really, powerful for me, it is this notion that I really want us, it's easy to say this, it's so hard in CUNY to do this, but I really want us to respond to our students' needs. Not us tell them what we're going to give them, but ask them first, what do they want? What's the best way to get this? What's going to work? And I know in some cases, they don't always make the best decisions. I'm not the biggest fan of the PAR system, to be honest with you. I don't know why our students can't make their, we can't advise them right and make their own choices, but I don't know enough about PAR to make more comments than that. But I'm not, I'm not so presumptuous or, about our students. In any case, my point is flexible, innovative, taking these experiences to build solutions, to build innovations, not because we want to, not because it's fun, not because it's part of our faculty research, but because our students need it, right? And it will help us deliver just better support and a better education, if you will, better results for students. Because a lot of what we do, we're faced with this right now, right? Right now we are set up basically for about 78% of our courses online for the fall. That's the schedule, maybe 75%, 25% in person or hybrid. It's the exact opposite of what students have asked for in 2 surveys. Right now we are playing the opposite, the inverse of what students have asked for. Let's see how that goes. We better be flexible. And that's, it's a complicated, I could do this one for an hour. It's a complicated thing. Because the reasons for faculty not wanting to teach in person, I understand the health and safety concerns. And we're just in this terrible timing bind where we had to make schedules right? But the system, the CUNY system, hasn't given us the health and safety protocols in time to deliver measures to faculty to help to make people feel safe. So, I mean, I understand it's a timing problem. I'm pretty confident, as I said earlier today, that on June 28th, right, in 19 days, the CUNY trustees will vote in a series of measures that will make us all feel a lot better about coming back to campus. But that's June 28th, and that's way too late for us to have that information to do scheduling, right? Anyway, so right now we've got this problem with, let's call it supply and student demand. We're not doing what students want. Let's see how that goes. But it's understandable why we're sort of stuck. Flexibility, innovation will be key to solving this. And in the end, we've got to become, if we can become kind of the most student-friendly place, really, student-centered place, really, not on a bumper sticker, but really, right? For older students and adult learners, for students who want online, for students, give them what they want. I guess that's my theme, like give them what they want. And there's just so much in everything you've said this afternoon. I've taken a bunch of notes, and now I've bent your ear, and I got to get off my soapbox because you're tired of hearing me. And there isn't time, Michelle, for the innovation discussion, but we could do it in the fall. I'm really interested in knowing, like, what can I do, on my soapbox with the foundation, with CUNY Central, as an advocate for you and for CUNY. What can I do to support your innovation, your solutions?
So should we come back in the fall with ideas for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I should say goodbye.
Not goodbye.
Well, hasta luego, which is a nicer way to put it.
Ciao for now, yeah. I think we should close. Misun, where's Misun? Would you like to take us out, or do you have concluding remarks, or do you want to respond to President Adams or put us on the path to the future?
Sure. Thank you so much to everyone for participating in this event. Thank you, President Adams, for making time for us. I think, so what I got the sense from President Adams' remarks was that there's a lot of positive, sort of promising flashes in our teaching and asynchronous learning, but there's still a lot of challenges with teaching, with learning remotely. And from the chat and from what people are saying, it sounds like faculty want more support, whether it's professional development support, or if it's support networks, so that we can negotiate teaching and being online, teaching remotely together, so that we're supporting each other. So yeah, more so, and obviously support for students as well, support in helping them negotiate technology, support in helping them negotiating just being students again after long breaks. So those are sort of the things I was hearing in the chat, in the conversations, in the reflections. Yeah, so thank you so much. Faith, is there anything you want to add? Or Michelle too, is there anything you want to add before we close out? Faith, you're muted.
There we go again. I'm sorry. Well, no, I think we did. I think what you said is good. I just want to thank President Adams for being with us today, and thank all of you for the conversations. I learned a lot, and so I want to bid you thank you and see you again. Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Thank you, Misun. Thank you, Michelle.